Good job today, man. One at a time, and we'll get the job done. Y'all know what to say. On three. 1, 2, 3.
And the home of the Jets.
What is going on, everybody? And I have a very special guest. We got NBC Sports, PFF, SNY, the draft voice of the New York Jets. Man, you're everywhere, my friend. Connor Rogers, what's up, man?
Tyson, great to be here, man. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Dude, is there, like, it's so cool. We were just talking before the show. Dude, look at where you started out in terms of draft analysis and where you are now. Have you had like a pinch me moment? You're like, wow, I can't believe I'm here right now.
I really have. I mean, I was joking with you before we got on. Like, I was going into my junior year of college and I was just blogging and everybody was trying to figure out what the hell podcasting was. And I was 20 years old and I'm 32 years old now. And I'm really lucky I get to do this for a living, covering the draft full time, fantasy football, Jets pre and post game. I mean, everybody knows I grew up a Jets fan. So it's the dream situation. I'm really lucky. I'm really fortunate. And I hope I can do this as long as possible.
The best thing about what you do is that you're a Jets fan. So you feel the pain, the anguish of Jet fans, you know, the passion, everything like that. Do you feel any pressure, especially on the post-game show, to be objective, but also be like, listen, I know what this fan base is thinking right now?
100%. I think when you look at the panel, right, you have Gelbs as the host, who's so good at what he does. And then you have two guys that were great players in the NFL that know what it's like after wins, after losses, and the highs, the lowest and lows. I mean, Willie was on a Super Bowl team. Bart had so much success with the Ravens and the Jets here. And then I think when you're like, everybody has different viewpoints, right? For me, I don't know what that's like, but I know what it was like sitting in the Meadowlands in the pouring rain. I know what it was like being up in the upper deck when they built MetLife and being all the way up there on Thanksgiving and watching Brad Smith's cleat fall off and on a kick return, or, you know, or the smell of the parking lot that I always say is like the perfect mix of, charcoal, piss, light beer, and I mean, that's like maybe some bad cigars, like almost black and milds. So, and I think that's, you know, I love football as much as anyone, and I love doing the analysis, but I think there's moments where that part matters so much. What you just said is like, hey, I know what the fan base is thinking, because not only have I been a part of this fan base basically since I could crawl, but I also see everything that they feel on Twitter or out in the streets or whatever. Like the pulse of the fans, especially with the New York Jets, because there's been a lot of lows over the last decade, is so important. And I'm lucky that they let me get to speak like that, right? Like how many, you know, and I don't pretend to watch every pregame show, but I feel like our pregame show is as authentic as it gets.
Yeah, and that's what makes it great. Like that's like the must listen. Like that's for me. It's like, you know, we all calm down. Like, all right, put on SNY. We want to hear what's going on. And then like it's a great mix, but it's like it's real. Like don't fluff us. Don't sell us nice. Right. We know what we saw. Like you know, it's like give us the real reaction, and then we know we're not crazy. And we, you know, it's like this is where the team's at right now.
Let me tell you this: Jets fans are not stupid, right? Like you cannot bullshit a Jets fan, because if they are still here after all of that, they've seen it all. You can't lie to them. Like you can't fake it anymore. So I think that's really special. I think it's not that any fan is stupid, but fans can get, you know, like my team never does wrong, right? Like that's a comment. I do the draft full year round. So like when I write a mock draft, or more importantly, after I do grades for every team, and I'll say, hey, I didn't like this team's draft. I could be wrong. But what I try to do is not be like, well, I didn't like this guy. It's more, I didn't like the process. And a lot of fans that root for winning teams are like, well, my team's always right. And sometimes fans of losing teams feel that way. I feel like with the Jet fan, for the most part, Jets fans are just, it's just real, because it's like, hey, I've seen this act before, so I'm going to keep it real.
That's what it is. Like, red flags when you see it. Like, you can't boast. Like, you can't boast. We literally seen this like 5 years ago, and then, like every Jet fan can reference somebody too. Like, I remember this player, we got this guy, this second round bust, this first round bust. Like, we have like a drinking contest for that. How many things we can go through, right? We have so many.
Bingo, yeah, it really is.
So the question I have for you is, before we even go into the Jets draft, is for this draft class this year, when did you start analyzing players? Like, how far back did you actually start for this class?
Usually for me now, it's the last week of May. What I try to do is, so we do the draft and then we do the grades, and then that'll take you about through the first week of May. And then I try really almost to not touch anything college related for about 3 weeks, because it's just like, this is the point where it's like the first thing I do when I open my eyes. It's the last thing I do before I close my eyes. Like, it's that 3-week buffer is really, really important. I don't shut down from football, but I try to really look at, this draft class now. How are these guys going to impact rosters? And in that way, and because people need that. Like, let's be real. Like, people that cover the team, they're not worried about the 7th round pick. They don't know anything about that guy. So, and then when that starts, I start to get the itch again at the end of May. And I watch the really high level guys, like the guys that are going to be top 10 picks or think that they should be top 10 picks. And then usually at some point in June, I'll try to take a legitimate vacation and turn off for that. And then when I get back in June, it's full throttle, where we do top 5s for every single position group in the following draft. And it's funny how much that could change over months, right? Like, you have guys that go back to school, guys that might be undrafted, then you have guys that live up to the hype and end up as first rounders. So a good baseline where you could build a top 50 going into the college season, where you're doing a position group almost every single week through the end of June to about halfway through August. So it's a process for me. I've been doing that for about 3-4 years maybe, and it's made it so much easier. Like, when I get to February, it's like, well, I've seen 150 of these guys, so now let's build it to 300, rather than, wow, I got a lot of work to do. And I think it helps me avoid, I'll see things this time of year where it's like, you got to see this guy, like, he should be, like, he reminds me of like Julio Jones, and it's like, I've been watching that guy for 2 years, like, he's not Julio Jones. And it's okay. I like people's excitement, but it just kind of helps you keep a consistent base throughout the whole process when it's that long.
Now, do you ever get to a point where you hear like some analysis somewhere else? You're like, wait a minute, I have a complete opposite. Do you go back and study again? Like, did I miss something here? Like,
oh yeah, a lot. For me, there's certain players like in this class, like Adonai Mitchell is somebody I've watched, I think, about 3 times now. I've watched him over the summer. I watched him at some point of the season when we did wide receivers early on. And then I went back and watched him again. For a guy that's going to go in the top 50, that's pretty uncommon to do 3 like full watches, because I'll have a guy somewhere, like I think with Mitchell, I had him in the 40 to 50 range. And a lot of people will call me and be like, hey, like this guy's going in the first round. Like the consensus doesn't see it the way you see it. And I'm like, that's fine. I probably won't move him, but I'll give him another shot. And then you go back again, and you just kind of look at different games, or I use a lot of filters now. Like, if I've watched enough games of a guy, like JJ McCarthy in Michigan, like I thought he was a developmental top of the second round pick. He could go in the top 15 now. And you try to look at things that are, why teams are high on him. Like, you filter out, like, let's see his 3rd and 7 pluses. Like, these are big downs. This is what you're going to see a lot of in the NFL. And he was really, really good on those downs. So it's little things like that can improve a grade or make you think differently of a guy. So yeah, I do find myself at least cross-checking some things. I find it more valuable in certain areas. Like, if I'm going through day 2 and day 3 offensive linemen with an offensive line coach in the league, if he sees something the way I don't, like, that's something I should cross-check, because he's going to know a lot. And I want to see, and I might not move a guy, but I might see stuff that, kind of has my eyes open a different way. So the circle you build around you scouting is just as important as the actual work you do, because having those conversations, even if it doesn't sway your opinion, and shouldn't always sway your opinion, is really, really vital.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild now with social media, because everybody's a draft analyst and expert, and
you got to tune a lot of it out too. I've learned. Yeah, it's and it's entertainment too. Like, all the national networks have leaned into the draft this month of the year, because it gets the views. It has people engaging because they feel differently. And I respect a lot of people's opinions, but I also will be the first to tell you, I don't click on every mock draft. I don't click on every big board. I don't listen to NFL draft podcasts. Like, at some point, it's like, I call it diluting the process. Sometimes too much information is not a good thing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Now, with the New York Jets, it's interesting because they had a solid offseason where Joe Douglas did a lot with limited resources. He surprised with some moves. So what do you think the Jets mindset is going into this draft? Are they looking like, especially in the first round, are they looking for a guy that must contribute, got to play, this, or what, like best player available? What do you think the Jets mindset is going in round one?
It's a golden question, right? Now, what they've done in this offseason is given themselves flexibility, right?
Right.
Like if you think of it like if they didn't sign Mike Williams, I
Mhm.
think everybody would be like, the Jets got to move up for Rome Odunze, Malik
Right.
Neighbors, probably not going to get Marv, or they got to take Brock Bowers, and
Right.
there'd be really no conversation.
Right.
And if they didn't sign Tyron Smith, everybody would be like, well, the Jets are going to take the best tackle at 10.
Right.
Like that's it. So making those moves in the pro market gave them flexibility where they're a little bit more unpredictable, which is a really good thing. And it's really important. So the Jets to me are a team that number one screams like, can we get out of this pick? Because there's a chance that I look at it like this. You play the odds and you run like teams like this, they run simulators of what's going to happen. The odds tell you that Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors are going to be gone, right? There's also a chance Brock Bowers is gone, but that's a different combo. You assume those three guys are gone. Well, if you move out of 10 and you move in a radius of like 10 to 12 picks back because somebody wants to come up for something that the Jets don't need, probably a quarterback.
Cool. Yep.
The type of offensive lineman you get might not be that different at 10 all the way back to 17 or whatever it may be.
Right.
So I think that's why I look at it. The Jets don't have a second round pick. They'd probably love to trade down. Those opportunities are not always on the table. So it'd be really interesting to see if they can get that. If they can't get out, the question you bring up is the golden one that I really try to balance a lot. You could see them talking themselves into Brock Bowers saying, well, he's probably going to be our number 2 or number 3 pass catcher. Like there's a distinguishment. The guy plays in the slot. He plays out wide. He also plays tight end. So he could be an impact pass catcher for us. And then you go into well, how do we solve our depth on the offensive line? And what are we doing for 2025? So it's like a double-edged sword because if you take Troy Fatanu or Taliza Fuanga, who I love, and those guys can push to start even at like left guard this year, and your offensive line would be amazing. If Mike Williams isn't ready, like who's catching passes for this team? Is it the 72nd overall pick? You better be right about who you take at 72, that he's an impact rookie. So my gut tells me if they can't trade out, because I can't emphasize enough that being the number one thing, I still think they would lean the offensive lineman because what people have wrong to me is that it doesn't help you now. I don't agree with that. It definitely helps you in the long term, and everybody agrees with that. Right. Is Brock Bowers more impactful now? Yes. I mean, there's no denying that. But the reality is, say if you take Troy Fatanu, or really any of these guys, they should be able to push John Simpson at left guard. We can't act like we like the John Simpson signing.
Right.
He is consensus the worst or the weakest offensive lineman on the team, as a starter.
Right.
He's a fine player, but if you take a first rounder, he should be starting over John Simpson. Right. Tyron Smith hasn't played a full season since 2015. I mean, the reality is that first round offensive lineman, I would set the over-under percentage snaps he plays this season at like 72%.
Yep.
That's a lot of football. Yeah. So I think that it can go either way, but I think that it's a flawed argument to say that the offensive lineman will just have no impact on the 2024 Jets.
Yeah, and that's the concern. You figure Tyron Smith, older, injury history. Morgan Moses coming off a pec injury, a little bit older. Yeah. AVT's been hurt the last couple of years. That's 3 out of 5 right there.
Tittman had both shoulders done in college. A lot 100%. Of people forget that. He could get banged up. It happens.
So, but the question I have, and I guess my counter argument to this, because I'll be completely honest with you. I'm all about getting weapons. I want a weapon.
And I don't blame you.
But I would be potentially more aggressive to actually go up and get a wide receiver, one of the top 3, instead of staying down. But because I'm panicked about the whole Mike Williams thing, about when he's actually going to be ready.
I agree.
So with the offensive line, which I completely agree with this, could there be a contingency where the Jets kind of have a handshake agreement? Like, you know what? We can get McGovern or Bakhtiari after the draft. So if we don't get an offensive lineman in round 1, or, we don't like a project in round 4, we have that kind of contingency and we could be aggressive and go get a wide receiver and kind of move up.
If they do exactly that, if they take Bowers at 10 or they move up for a Dunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Malik Neighbors, it tells me that there's 2 things in play. One, they're going to add probably Bakhtiari over the summer, and we'll see what he could do. Nobody with a straight face can tell you what he's going to bring to the table this year. 2, they probably really do believe in Carter Warren as a swing tackle.
Yeah.
And they see him every day. I don't.
Yeah.
So hopefully the problem I have with that is, or why the fans might have a problem with that is, they did try to sell the fan base on that bit Max Mitchell being that last year.
Yeah.
And it blew up in their face really quickly. So now Carter Warren is his own man. It's not fair to, well, Max Mitchell didn't work. Carter Warren's not going to work. Like, that's not fair either. So I agree. Here's my, my trade parameters with that idea. Cause I agree with you. Like, I think Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. are the highest, like, upper echelon difference makers. Like, they are on the field and you're like, damn, we got to worry about them and Garrett Wilson.
Right.
Really? So I look at it like, can I use 2025 capital to make that move? Or am I trading away my draft this year? That's because the Jets in the third, they have a third round pick, 72, and they have 2 fourths. They really need depth with those picks. You think safety? They're going to need a corner to eventually replace DJ Reed when they let him walk, because they're going to make Sauce Gardner the top paid corner in the league. And they're probably going to make Michael Carter one of the highest paid slots in the league if they do it right.
Right.
Somebody's got to go at that point. Unfortunately, it might be DJ Reed.
Right.
And then you probably still need another depth piece somewhere along with one of those picks. So if you go from 10 to, I've heard Tennessee would answer calls. I've heard Atlanta would answer calls. Say the draft goes quarterback. Somebody comes into 4 or 5 for a quarterback. That's 4 quarterbacks in front of you.
Yep.
Let's say the Giants do take a wide receiver. We'll call it Marv today. The Chargers just don't, like, Harbaugh's identity. It just doesn't seem like he's going to do that. We'll see. I mean, if the Titans say, hey, we'll move to 10 because we like the linemen, they'll be there anyway. Give us your 2025 second round pick because we're a new regime, new staff. We're going to get to make that pick. We're not worried about getting fired. And a 4th this year to move up 3 spots. And you get Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
Like, you got to do that, right?
Yep.
Like, that's something you got to do. So I see eye to eye with you. It's a matter of teams are comfortable taking future capital. Yeah,
I think you have to, because I'm twofold. I'm worried about when Mike Williams is going to be ready, and I'm worried about a Garrett Wilson injury. Like, if Garrett Wilson gets banged up, then you're really screwed, because now you're panicking a little bit. And, like, I guess you can go out and chase a Beckham or Hunter Renfrow or whatever else. But I'm like, you know what? You want to get a tag team partner for Garrett Wilson this year and going forward as well, so you can do that. Now, are there offensive linemen? Like, I know everybody loves Alt, but is there an offensive lineman that, would you trade up for? Or you're saying, what, let me just see who falls to you? Because, like, there could be a run on quarterbacks. That's very real. And the wide receivers, like you just talked about, could an offensive lineman, a quality one, be like 2 picks away? You're like, you know what? Let's go get him.
I feel like I would stay put if Alt fell, which isn't insane. Like, I think a lot of people have sold themselves on there's just no way Alt falls. I mean, I get the Tennessee thought, but we don't know fully what Tennessee's thinking. Yeah. I mean, you have Bill Callahan there, is one of the greatest offensive line coaches this league has seen. He might be like, I'm going to get the most out of this group.
Yep.
We'll draft guys later, and we need a playmaker at 7. Like, we like Bowers, or we want to trade out. Say the draft once again. There's 4 quarterbacks in front of you, and say all 3 receivers go in front of you.
Yep.
That's 7 of the picks right there. Atlanta will move if you call. So you go to 8, shouldn't cost much to go up 2 spots.
Right.
And people will be like, why wouldn't you just wait? Well, other teams will call too. Yeah. And then if you took Alt at 8, that's interesting, because how do you play Alt this year? Like, are you just waiting for Tyron to get hurt, or do you think Alt can play guard? I never evaluated Alt as a guard, so I couldn't even, like, that's hard to compute right now.
Right.
But it would be really interesting. It would be, because he is just such a great player, and he's going to be your future left tackle of the next 8 to 10 years. I could see that scenario. Nobody else, though. Everybody else is like, their ranges starts at 10. Whether it's Fuanga, Fashanu, Fatanu, Latha, like, their range is all going to start at 10. So no, I think if Alt had a surprising fall, maybe just because they love the player, but it just goes back to, like, okay, now how are we utilizing our first round pick?
Now, the most polarizing guy that I think has divided Jets Twitter easily is Brock Bowers, where either people think he's generational, next George Kittle, or he's a complete bust. And they're mentioning Kyle Brady and all the other guys that failed in the past. And where do you stand with him? Because to me, it's like, I respect the talent, dude. He's a phenomenal athlete. I worry about Hackett using him, Rodgers using him. And it's kind of like I don't want to say a luxury item. I like Conklin a lot. It's just, to me, I just have wide receivers a bigger need at this point. But tell me, like, where do you stand with Brock Bowers?
I think number one, if you take him, and he's like you said, in a vacuum, he's a great player. Like anybody that takes Brock Bowers, the draft grade cannot just be an F or a D or a C. Like he's just too good.
Right.
But you bring up utilization, and you need to be sure you're basically drafting him to be your slot receiver. Like that. That's how I would. So now the Jets have had success when Hackett finally did this, which drove me nuts. When they started playing Garrett in and out.
Yep.
Like if you just put Garrett outside, he's good, really good. But Garrett is very similar to how the Bills maximized Stephon Diggs all those years, where when you move him around, the coverage can't just adjust to him and wipe him out.
Right.
So do you want to do that? Bowers can also play a little outside. He can play true tight end. So you need a true utilization plan. And I think you nailed it. Like none of us trust this offensive staff to utilize unique players. And Bowers is undoubtedly a unique player. Now, the argument for him is, one, it feels like this team always stinks in the red zone. Yeah. He's an elite red zone player. He's got great hands. He catches everything. You can throw him screens, and he creates his own yards. He's a tough dude in the run game. Like he really wants to land his blocks. Like he's a great player. But if you draft him and go, you're our tight end, that's not someone you take you don't draft that player in the top 10, nowhere. Like you need to say, you're going to sometimes be our slot receiver. You're going to sometimes be our tight end. We're sometimes going to motion you in the backfield. In the red zone, we're going to isolate you out wide and throw you fades. Like
right.
You and you got to be like, okay, we're going to run all this like split zone and we're going to get you on the move in the blocking game. If you just draft him and you think he's a static player, like you're wasting your time.
Now, do you? A part of me thinks like at 10, it kind of not annoys me. I think it's just not good value. But if they traded back, say to 15, and then got him, you get more compensation, and then got him. Would that make you right? If that's kind of, would that make you feel more comfortable with it? You think?
I think that's the dream. I mean, when you just look up the basic like value of what you would get, you bring up 15 as a barometer. Let's say the Colts are, they want to come up from 15 because they love like the best defensive player in the draft, whoever they think that is, because that's how you get the best defensive player in the draft. If you use the Rich Hill trade chart, which I think is a little bit more modern, that point difference is about 54 points different. Like 54 points on that board is the equivalent of a third round pick in the middle of the third round. Right. I mean, if you had then 2 threes, say 72, and we'll call it Indy has 82, and you still got Bowers at 15. I mean, then you're still picking twice on day 2. Like that's how you play the draft. Like that's, and we're in a weird spot where we've seen Joe Douglas have a lot of success moving up. He went up and got Jermaine. He went up and got Brees. Went up and got ABT. We have not seen him, besides the Mims trade. He moved out of the second round that year, and they didn't utilize those picks well at all. But the idea was the right idea.
Right.
We haven't seen him really play the board back. That would be really, really savvy to me.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. Like I'm all about the trade back. I'm just kind of like, I'm thinking
you can't go too far back.
Right.
There's a weird cutoff with this draft. I'd call the cutoff like 21. I'd be a little nervous at that point.
Yeah. Now, after the top 3 wide receivers, who would you have as your 4th and 5th? Because that's like, could there be a surprise wide receiver 10 taking that? We're like, oh shit, where'd that one come from? Like, it's where do you stand with that?
I think Brian Thomas Jr., like I have the wide receivers where I look at it and go, okay, I think Marv's the best player in the draft. I think Malik Neighbors is the 4th best player in the draft.
Okay.
And then I look at Adunze and Brian Thomas Jr. like almost back to back. Like Adunze is like he stays right inside the top 10. And then Brian Thomas Jr. is a top 15 player for me.
Okay.
He's unbelievable. I mean, size, speed, acrobatic hang time. The Jets, oddly enough, they don't have, people get confused when I say this. They don't have somebody to stretch the field. Right. Garrett is fast. Yep. Mike Williams can climb the ladder and jump over anyone. But they don't have the guy where you line up and go, like, damn, this dude's going to run 4-3. If I don't have a safety over me, we are screwed. They don't have, like Garrett, we've seen him do that, but you want Garrett's success to come from almost the refinement in the intermediate area of the field where you just can't cover him. Like you can't cover Garrett in the 10 to 15. He can win over the top, but I don't want Garrett running a 9 that's a waste of Garrett. If you're like, hey, go deep every time. Right. Brian Thomas Jr., you could do that. Like you could legitimately be like, if he's out there on the perimeter, and then your 11 personnel is him and Mike Williams on the outside, Garrett in the slot, that takes defenders out of the box for the run game. That stretches the field. You're going to see a lot of split safeties. I mean, I get why people are like, yeah, he's a little raw and that seems early. I think he's really got it. And that goes back to your point. Like if I traded back a couple spots,
Yeah,
I would highly consider taking him.
Now, you mentioned the drop-off. This is what I always find fascinating. We're not having a second-round pick absolutely blows because you sit and you wait forever in the third round. You kind of want to trade up. In terms of wide receiver, where a guy that can contribute, say, legitimately this year, where's the drop-off from, like, your top 4 or 5 to getting the third round? Like is there, like, a spot, like, mid-second round or late second round where you're like, I'm going to get a little nervous. The Jets got to be more aggressive?
Yeah, it's his tricky because I have it. Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, Brian Thomas Jr., Troy Franklin, Jalen Polk, Ricky Pearsall, Lad McConkey, Adonai Mitchell. Like, I think all those guys are comfortably in my top 45.
Okay.
And I could even say that argument for Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy. Like, they're kind of top 45. Roman Wilson is after that, and Xavier Legette, like top 60-ish. Malachi Corley is right around there. So they're going to go. Like,
right.
I mean, when you just do the basic exercise you just open Tankathon and look at the draft order in the second round, starting with the Panthers at 33, New England at 34, they could take wide receivers. The Chargers at 37, the Titans at 38. Green Bay feels like always takes one in the second round, but I don't know about that. The Texans at 42, even though they just traded for Diggs, probably not. But like the Saints, the Colts, the Giants, Jacksonville. I mean, I really think from 33 to, we'll call it 53, that's the Eagles, 8 to 9 receivers go. Exactly. So then the Jets at 72, to back up your point, you're looking more in the, like, can Malachi Corley make it there? Does Devontae Walker, a vertical guy from UNC, make it there? Javon Baker from UCF, he's somebody that can win down the field. Like, that's where it gets really, really difficult because you're right. It's a really, really long wait. There will be receivers there, but I think before 72, I would say 15 receivers are gone.
Yeah.
Like, that's really crazy when you think about it.
Yep. And now the other thing is with the offensive lineman. Say the Jets find a way to get a wide receiver in round 1. Saying they stay at 10, they get a wide receiver. A miracle happens there. What is the drop-off with the offensive line talent where it's like, all right, again, you're waiting. Now you're looking for quality depth, whether you believe in Carter Warner or not. But, like, is there still quality linemen in the third round, fourth round that you can still bank on? Or is that becoming more project, hold your breath kind of players?
I really like the interior guys in that range. I don't love the tackle drop off. I like a guy like Blake Fisher, Notre Dame's right tackle. I like him if he's there at 72. I think he's going to be, I think people are really going to like him. I think there's a drop off after the top 12 tackles where if you look at the interior players, there's a lot of guys that are going to kick from tackle to guard, and they're going to be really good at guard at the next level, whether it's KT Leviston from Kansas State, Nathan Thomas from Louisiana Lafayette. Like, those are tackle converts to guard that are going to be really, really good. If the Jets say, hey, you know what? We want another center on this team, like Bo Limmer, Tanner Bortolini from Wisconsin, Hunter Norzad from Penn State, Cedric Van Pran from Georgia. Like, the interior class is deep, and these guys can really play. The tackle drop-off to me, if the Jets don't take a tackle at 10 and don't trade out, I almost think they're just kind of kicking it. Like, they're just like, you know what? We just didn't get one. We didn't get, like, and maybe they try to take a developmental guy later on, but no guy that would have an impact on this season at all. So that's a tough decision you got to make. You got to make sure that you got depth in the wings.
Yeah, and that's especially with this team. Now, what are your thoughts on taking a quarterback in this draft? Everybody's saying, maybe in the fourth round you take a flyer. Everybody's saying the same things. Are you buying into that? Or are you like, you know what? They need depth in so many different positions. We just talked about a bunch of them. That's kind of a luxury item where quarterback, while it seems great to learn from Tyrod and Aaron Rodgers, it's not really feasible where the Jets are at right now.
You almost need one to fall to that 6th round pick. I think it's pick 185.
Yep.
I don't know if they agree with me on that. Like, I think the Jets could very well take one in the 4th round.
You think
and this quarterback class is not deep. I mean, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix, Jaden Daniels, and J.J. McCarthy are probably all going in the 1st round. Bo Nix probably easily goes in the top 35, 40 picks. Spencer Rattler and Michael Pratt, I think both go on day 2. I really do. So then you're looking at Jordan Travis from Florida State. Who maybe they look at him.
Yep.
Devin Leary from Kentucky, really inconsistent. Joe Milton from Tennessee, really inconsistent. like that. Those are the only guys I think are draftable. Maybe like Sam Hartman might get drafted, but you're right. Like the idea in theory is awesome. This guy gets to sit in a room with Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor, like the two pro of pros.
Right.
And you got one guy in Rodgers. It's also such a unique dynamic for a young player. Rodgers is won 1 million MVPs, a Super Bowl. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Tyrod was a complete afterthought when he came to the league and developed himself into a guy that started and won a lot of football games and is a high-end backup, like contract after contract. That's like you have to be a little bit different to be able to live like that. And like, it's a different mentality.
Of course.
So these are great guys to be around. So you love the idea of it, but like you said, the supply doesn't exist. I mean, there's just not a lot of good quarterbacks in this draft after the guys that go so early. And then the Jets don't have a lot of capital. So I think they do take one.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know how much I love it if it's in the first 4 rounds. Unless Pratt fell to the 4th round, that I would sign off on.
Yeah. So I guess one of my last questions for you is, if you had your perfect draft for the Jets, like this is, Connor Rogers' world, we're living in it, and you're drafting it. What is your perfect draft for the Jets? Like the first, say, round 1 to 3.
Well, let's say that one, I would love to trade out. That would be like my perfect situation would be to trade out, still end up with, Fatanu, because he could play left guard this year.
Yeah.
Or I would even take Brian Thomas Jr. If you somehow got a 2nd round pick back, I would try to take one of the receivers between Jalen Polk, Ricky Pearsall, Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson, like Malachi Corley. And then the 3rd round, you could do really whatever you want. Like if Tyler Nubin, the safety from Minnesota, is there, I'd take him all day. You could start at safety. The reality is, let's assume that all 3 wide receivers are gone and they can't get out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
I still kind of stand on the hill. Like, I love Brock Bowers. I will not kill that pick. I still would take the offensive lineman and flip a coin. Like, if you want a guy with left guard flexibility this year, Fatanu is the guy. If you want a mauling guard with right tackle flexibility, Fuanga is the guy. If you want a true left tackle, Fashanu is the guy. Like, they're all really high-end players.
Yeah.
And then at 72, you're going to look in the bucket. Like, once again, Malachi Corley, Javon Baker, Devontae Walker. Like, those aren't names people want to hear, but it's just the reality we're playing in right now. Yeah, so my perfect draft, like, it's really tough to pass on Bowers. It really is. But I still would lean with one of those big 3 offensive linemen. And then I would see what I could do with my 2nd rounder in 2025. I would see what that could buy me. Like, if I can buy my way back into the high-end 2nd round range of this draft and end up with Polk or Pearsall, I would think I had a home run. Like, I'd be like, okay, I got our number 3 wide receiver, and I got a bona fide star-ish lineman.
Yeah.
It's just hard to, like, that's going to help your football team this year. That'd be my strategy for sure.
And I guess the last question I have for you is, based on what Joe Douglas has done this offseason, as of now going into the draft, because like after last season, I was pissed. I'm like, they blew it with the backup quarterback. They blew it a lot of things. I'm like, you can make a case to fire people based on the way they handled things. Even Bryce Huff pissed me off.
Feels like they kind of did quietly. Right. Yeah. Not enough, but yeah.
But it's like, do you think Joe Douglas has done enough this offseason going into the draft where it's like, you know what? The ball's in your court now, Sal. This is the team that you can win with. You better win. Where like he's kind of separated himself from Sal at all, or there's still like a tandem?
That's a good question, because I'm not a fan of like the half measures thing,
right?
Where I agree with you. Saleh has to win with this team. Like, this is a good roster on paper. And it's not even a roster where last year you could poke holes and like the water fills up and sinks the ship.
Right.
If Rodgers goes down, Tyrod Taylor will win you games.
100%.
If Tyron Smith misses time, hint, he will. Like, there should be a depth piece that can get you through a couple games. So yeah, I think that the coaching staff, all the pressure should be on them. Now, with that being said, Douglas did what saves GMs, and I applaud this. He fixed his mistakes a little expensively, but the Jets, all the moves they made the last 2 years are because of mistakes he made. They missed on Mekhi Becton. They had to go out and pay Tyron Smith. And they also gave out some bad offensive line contracts before that because of that. They missed on Elijah Moore, and they were scrambling for another wide receiver. And they kind of still are. Like, we like Mike Williams, but like, I'm with you. We're like tempering expectations off an ACL. They totally blew it on Zach Wilson. They had to go get Aaron Rodgers. to credit Joe Douglas, like those are really good fixes. Most of the time as a GM, your success is dictated not on your hits automatically, but how you fix your mistakes. And I think he has.
Yep.
But at the same time, we sit here and we go, man, if they took Tristan Wirfs, like we're running to the podium to take Brock Bowers, or we're trading up and getting Marvin Harrison Jr. Like if we didn't miss on, Zach Wilson, like what does this look like? And getting a quarterback's hard. That's a tough one. But I agree with you like two different ways. I think the pressure's on Saleh. They have to win right now. But if this thing all falls apart, like you prefer the clean slate because it's really hard. Like that would mean Douglas is getting his third head coach. And assuming it's the end of the Rodgers tenure, that'd be his fourth quarterback coming in. Like not a lot of guys in league history have gotten that. But I do get the thought process. The bottom line is the staff has to win this year.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, Connor, first of all, thank you so much for your time, man. Because I know you're busy as hell. I text you to help my breath. I'm like, is he even gonna be? He's like, does he have a half hour? But I'm sure everybody knows where you are. But give us your lineup for the draft week, man. I'm sure you're all over the place.
Yeah, everything written will be on NBCSports.com. My final mock draft, my final 300 big board, everything we do at Badlands with the Jets, and I will be on SNY's pre-draft show night 1, the post-draft show Sunday night. And then at NBC, we'll tape reactions to every pick rounds 1 to 3. Those are really easy. They're on NFL on NBC's YouTube channel where like the Sunday Night Football stuff is. So you can watch every pick reaction there. It'll be a busy week for sure. I'm excited.
Dude, I can't wait. This the whole Brock Bowers thing is just going to be wild. Because that happens, the fan base is going to be.
You know what's going to happen, Tyson? He's somehow going to go before 10 and everybody's like, oh, like the people that didn't want him were like, well, now we're safe. And the people that wanted him are going to be like, oh, like I wish we got him. It's like, and none of it mattered at all. None of it ever mattered.
That's true. Well, Connor, have a great week, man. I love your analysis. We all do, man. And it's so cool to see how much you're accomplishing, man. Because we basically watched your whole journey as now you're on SNY. So it's awesome, dude. So I'm so happy for you. It's great. And thank you for your time, dude. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tyson. I really appreciate you. Much appreciated.
And we did beer one time down the shore.
Yeah, please. Gotta have it.
Have a good night, man. Awesome.